All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I am speaking with someone wearing a babushka, which is always cool. It doesn't happen very often on the podcast. This may be a first time. And I think that before we get into anything here, the best way to start this off is if you want to introduce yourself and just give a bit of background about where you're coming from. Because, a lot of the people on this podcast are kind of very well established in Winnipeg artists. And as I understand, you're pretty new to the city. So maybe if you want to just give a little bit of information about where you're coming from, and we can sort of take it from there.
For sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on Witchpolice Radio. I'm Kitz Willman. I'm a multi-instrumentalist and producer, originally from Saskatoon, Treaty 6. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
And then in 2012, I moved to Ottawa. So I was out in Ottawa and then living in Kingston for a bit. And then I just moved here to Winnipeg in September. So very
Cool.
fresh to the city, though I've been here before. I guess 2010 would have been the first time I played Winnipeg, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to play in lots of bands before I really was mainly solo, Saskatoon based.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Why Winnipeg? I mean, I love Winnipeg personally, and obviously I wouldn't be doing the show, I don't think, if I didn't. But what was the reason for you to come here? Because it's not, a lot of people come here and then leave and then come back and then eventually end up back here kind of permanently anyway. But you're coming from somewhere else and choosing Winnipeg, I assume, right?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're describing about Winnipeg, I'm going to be that way with Saskatoon. Like I
Sure.
am going to, and I'm not quite ready for that yet, but I was doing a PhD in Kingston. That's why I was living there, and I dropped out. So it was like, I don't have my student status anymore, so I have to leave the province anyways. And what's a big city that I'm interested in that's a little bit closer to home? And yeah, that's a place where I've always enjoyed myself. I've had the opportunity to work here a bit in the summertime, once or twice, and just having a few pre-existing connections. And then thinking like, what's kind of the sentiment that people have about places in Canada? And they would say, I think, similar things about Saskatoon as I would about Winnipeg. And so
Definitely.
I know how much potential there is here. And yeah, it's just one of those places where like I'm not interested if you're from Vancouver. If I'm looking at your Bandcamp page or something, not that I moved here for that.
Yeah, sure.
Like, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. I've been in these places. I've had fun, but I think there's something more about that just sub-million city. I think Winnipeg and Ottawa are quite similar population-wise. So,
Okay.
Yeah, quite a few aspects to it, but mostly just to be back out west, back on the prairies.
Cool. Yeah, it's always good. Always good to be back on the prairies.
Yeah.
So obviously you're coming to the city during a weird time for everyone because the pandemic's happening. So I was going to ask you, what was your experience kind of getting into the music scene here? But like you said, you've been through on tour with other bands and things over the years, and obviously no one's playing shows in Winnipeg right now, so that's not even a possibility at this point. But did you have sort of pre-existing maybe a pre-existing idea of what the scene was like here musically?
Well,
before you answer that, the reason I asked that is because I think that I include myself in this. I think a lot of Winnipeggers have this outsized idea of how important our music scene is, and we maybe feel like its reputation kind of extends beyond Manitoba's borders. I don't know if it does so much, but we definitely think that. Like, there's this aggrandized version of what Winnipeg's music scene is, and I'm definitely guilty of that too.
Well, for me, I have to say, like, Comeback Kid is my favorite hardcore band.
Okay.
So that originally is just like, it was a place where there was heavy music happening.
Sure.
And there was something about it that the bands always seemed bigger. And I think because when you have a Propaganda, you have a Comeback Kid, like there's just label bands that aren't really happening in Saskatoon. There was a band from Regina, Into Eternity, that was a big like metal band, but not really anyone kind of in that like hardcore sphere, which I really like. So Comeback Kid, yeah, I've loved them for a long time. And then just the friends that I've made, like Waster is the main band that I know.
Cool band, yeah.
Yeah, I've known them for quite a while. Lots of partying, playing like small town Saskatchewan and Alberta with them.
Right on.
And then so there's that side of things, like the heavier music scene, and then of course like John K. Sampson and some of the other artists that are like indie. But then the other side is like Peanuts and Corn, like that hip hop kind of side of Winnipeg. And I knew like Winnipeg's Most and a couple other acts as well. But Yeah, like, so there was one time when I was first moving to Kingston, my car had died. And so I came back to Saskatchewan and I bought my mom's van off her and then I drove it back. And I was listening to the Third Verse podcast, which
Yeah, it's a good show. Yeah, really good show.
And so when I was in Saskatoon, I was at the Vinyl Diner and I was like, okay, I knew I wanted to get someone that had an episode on Third Verse.
Yeah.
And so I got Trinipeg 78 by Nestor
Windrush.
And I'd heard him in features, but I'd never heard like a full album. And so I listened to that podcast. And right when I hit the perimeter, I wasn't stopping in Winnipeg because I was going, I stayed in Kenora that night, just at Walmart. But right when I got to Winnipeg, the episode ended and I put on the album and he told so many stories of the album. And it just was like, a really crazy musical experience. And then that was the main album I had in my van the whole time I lived in Kingston.
Cool. Very cool.
And so when I first moved here, Rob Crooks had just released his new album. And so when I was getting it, I bought it from him and I met up with him. I didn't know him before, but now we're buddies. And I was like, well, this is going to be the Winnipeg soundtrack. And so his new album, Introducing the Ghost, has been
great album too. Yeah.
The main, if not only thing I've listened to up until now that my album's done. I have to like check the mix in the van, of course.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, okay. Well, maybe that's a good segue into like, how do you define what your sound is? Because it's obviously hip hop influence, but there's way more going on than just that. I mean, there's like some really, really out there stuff that's like almost avant-garde jazz sort of sounding. There's things that are a lot more aggressive and a lot more punk, and although not necessarily punk genre-wise, but punk aesthetically. And there's like some, the vocals are pretty unique. So I guess you could call it a hip hop album, but it's more than that, right? Like, how do you define it?
Well, I love, so I came up in the MySpace era, right? So I love when they used to have the 3 genres. You'd be like hardcore metal, happy hardcore, something that you didn't know what it was. It was a real genre and you put it in. But
I used to always put tape music on mine whenever. Apparently tape music was a genre. I stuck it on everything.
Nice. Because you had tapes.
Exactly.
That was the idea. Yeah. And that was like my band. We put happy hardcore because we were like not like gothic hardcore. We were like partying kind of. So it was like, okay. And then people come to your page and they're like, this is not happy hardcore. Anyway, but well, for me, it's like definitely hip hop, but experimental / jazz. That's kind of like the 3 genres in which I like to think that I operate in. And just in the idea that you really have jazz and then you have experimentation and then you have hip hop. There's obviously other genres that contributed to that formation, but I think that's kind of the lineage that at least I've experienced the most. Like, because I'm a little bit younger than some of these like Canadian underground cats, like there wasn't as clear of that, like you're a hip hop head. There, like I've always been a hip hop head, but there wasn't like that as a grouping. And even playing in hardcore bands and stuff, there wasn't really that as a grouping as well. So the kind of bands I played in early on, like my first one was a hardcore band, but it was drum and bass. So a lot of what you're saying about kind of my sound now, I think existed then. First band, just figuring out vocals. I'm playing drums at the same time as I'm singing. So like kind of holding back in certain ways and stuff like that. And so over the course of the Kitz Willman project, it's been trying to get back to a songwriting style that is a little bit more like that, and thinking about the performance first and foremost. And obviously right now there's no shows happening. So for me to make a record is like the first time I'm performing in Winnipeg, living here, you know what I mean?
Sure,
So I really like to improvise as much as possible. And I think Royal Visit to Uranium City is an example of like an improvised focus release. Whereas like 2 releases ago, my Driving Hand is a lot more like straight up hip hop. It might have like the different kind of experimental styles, but it really is meant to be hip hop. So I kind of have that idea first and foremost of like, is this going to be hip hop or is this going to be jazz as the leading genre? And it's always going to be experimental within that. You know what I mean?
But even the vocals on this one, they sound jazzy in the sense that it comes across. I don't know if this is how you did them, but they seem very stream of consciousness, and in certain songs more than others. But it definitely seems like a lot of it is the vocals are being improvised as well. Is that accurate, or is that just the way I'm hearing it?
No, totally. So the first song I had I had one line, the like I'm kneeling on an iceberg, leaving wishes in the water, which is in a later song.
Yeah.
So I'd had the later song, and I was like, I need an intro. And so like all the babushka like storytelling in that is just like all the concepts I'd been thinking of coming out through that song. And Dust on the Bookshelf is like almost entirely improvised.
Okay.
There's a line in the middle that I think is really good, and it's like, I'm not gonna say that's totally improvised. I thought of that line earlier when I was out for a walk, knowing I was gonna record later, and so that's kind of like, I wouldn't label something a freestyle because I'm doing stuff like that. And then I might even just like grab a book off the shelf and kick a line. Like the very opening of the record is just literally read right from that book. So while that song Kings is improvised, there is like, oh, I'm just stealing right from this book, or I'm like going here or whatever.
Which is like sampling basically, but sampling lyrics out of a book.
Exactly. Which, sampling as a concept is something that I love to really use as a driving force. Whether that is like sampling myself in the way that I'm using a saxophone performance on a recording or something like that.
Where does the sax come from? Because I mean, sax isn't typically something you hear in hardcore bands. So obviously you must have come to that instrument in a bit of a different way.
Yeah, sax. I've always enjoyed saxophone in jazz, like Pharoah Sanders, Matana Roberts, Cassie Kenoshi. These are like a couple of my favorite composers and performers. They all mainly play sax. But like I had did trumpet in grade 6, didn't really like it, stuck with drums, that kind of situation. But when I was living in Kingston, so this would have been 2 years ago now, they had an instrument library. So I was able to just like get a saxophone.
That's cool.
And try it. And I did have to buy, some reeds, but they gave me one reed to go with, and that was it. So I started from just having a rental. And then I bought like a pretty crappy used one that's fairly broken. But since living in Winnipeg, I bought like a little student one off someone, because obviously their kid wasn't doing band anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I've been playing that. But yeah, I'm like totally self-taught, just trying to like express, a lot of times I think people think drums is like really, you're getting it out, you're hitting, you're thrashing, but I've never felt like that kind of expression of the blues in the way that I feel with playing the saxophone. It's just like, it's like, when you're so mad, you just want to spit. Yeah. It's like doing that, but it sounds good.
Yeah,
it doesn't always sound good.
Even if it doesn't, though, sax is. I think it's one of those instruments too that, I mean, a lot of my favorite jazz stuff, it would be someone just going completely insane on a saxophone, where it's not even playing notes; they're just playing noise, and it works so well for that. Like, it just has something about the range of sounds that it can make makes it very well suited for expressing without necessarily having the technique behind it, right?
Totally. I think it's kind of like a xylophone. If you just mash on a xylophone, you're going to hit a couple like semitones, or things are going to happen themselves just because the setup of the instrument. Yeah. And so a lot of this, or pretty much all of the sax, was played through a pedal as well. So I'm using like a delay pedal to really just, you can make that one little chunk of sound and then start making it be a bit more melodic because you're bending it or whatever like that. So that's been really opening up the saxophone for me. Is kind of, I think things like, you think of someone like The Edge and everyone will say, oh, pedals are just a crutch for that guy. Yeah. I welcome that idea with playing saxophone. Anything that's going to make it sound a bit better is great for me.
Right. Yeah. Well, it does sound cool on the record. Like, whether it's the way you're playing it or the pedals or both. I mean, it's a unique sound, and it comes through. Like, the best thing I saw is when someone I know posted your record on your Bandcamp link on the Facebook, and another friend saw it and commented that, like, he hates saxophones but actually like this, which I thought was cool.
Man, that's so cool.
It was a cool thing, because I mean, I have definitely had arguments with this guy about how great saxophones are, and he doesn't agree with me at all. But even as someone who hated saxophone, he dug what you were doing with it. So that's it's
I love it.
You do something right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. I was gonna ask you, like, okay, so the concept behind this record, I mean, the babushka thing, you're wearing one right now. The Royal Visit to Uranium City, what's going on with all this? I mean, it's obviously relating to a historical event in Saskatchewan in the 50s, right?
Yeah. So in 1959, they opened the St. Lawrence Seaway in Montreal. Like that's all man-made, right?
Yeah.
So the Queen and Prince Philip came to smash a bottle of champagne on that or whatever.
Right.
And then, of course, we're here to do our colonial due diligence and go to all our little colonies and,
of course,
and check on how everyone's doing. But the Queen, she didn't actually go to Uranium City. And it was later revealed that she was pregnant at the time of the tour. So it's like, oh, did they not want her to go near the radiation or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
Ideas like this. And so my personal connection to Uranium City is just through my dad, that he's a truck driver and he used to go there. So he's been in one of those places where like, it already has that name that just stands out, but having that idea, he used to do the ice roads to go there and he quit ice roads and when I was a kid and he just started doing it again this year. But so that was like a place that kind of stuck out to me. But then I think there's not really actually any literal content about the royal visit.
Right.
That's just like atmosphere, and the title really came when I was pretty much done.
Okay.
But I was watching a lot of YouTube at the time, and I really like YouTube a lot. I'm not on Netflix, I'm on YouTube like that. And whatever it is, documentaries or train hopping videos.
Yeah, sure.
But so I watched this movie where these kids like went into Chernobyl, like where you're not allowed to go.
Yeah.
Where it's all the radiation. And so that was what made me start thinking about this idea of a royal visit to Uranium City and just hearing a bit more about Chernobyl and like then wanting to learn all about it, because these kids are just going and they just climb on stuff and then like leave kind of. It's pretty cool, but really random for me. That's not the type of thing I normally watch, but just learning about what happened at Chernobyl. I didn't really know the story of that, and just the amount of people that went in and like would just work for like 10 minutes and shovel one shovel of this toxic waste and like then I'm out. That's all I can do. So to me, it's like a royal visit to Uranium City is the colonial center going to these places that they extract from all the time and saying like, hey, thanks.
Right.
Hey, thanks for doing the dirty work.
Yeah. Here's your one visit for 50 years and you get a handshake and then
And Uranium City is a ghost town now.
Right.
So even if now we've got Harry and Meghan and this is the whole blah, 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 they're going to do the next royal tour, like that's going to be the thing that's going on with someone like that. Right. Well, you're not even going to go to Uranium City anymore. What I mean? No. And so
that was a one-off. That was a one-time historical event. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's like aspects of playing with the real idea of Uranium City here and like colonialism in Canada, what that means even for me thinking about like my dad hauling uranium or you hear about like the Dene in the Northwest Territories that like they've met with people from Okinawa that got bombed and there's been like an apology for their territory producing the uranium that was used and stuff like that. So just like a real idea of what's a royal visit to Uranium City other than what happened in Nagasaki. You know what I mean?
So those are a lot of heavy ideas and a lot of like well thought out concepts and everything. But how do you translate that into something that is sonically abstract? Like because I don't know if the average listener is going to hear this, and that's not necessarily going to come through. Maybe some parts of it will.
No.
But so how does that translate then? How do you take that idea and those concepts and then put them into something that's, relatively chaotic at times musically?
Well, I think the thing for me is understanding that it's really hard to grasp these kind of concepts. And I'm not even fully understanding it myself. That's why I'm doing on this particular record. That's why I'm doing improvised parts.
Right. Okay.
Like, I don't know why the city council is a volcano. But it makes a lot of sense when I start to think more about it. Exactly, like, okay, the volcano is like the reactor that blew up and it was unpredictable. All these scientists in the world, but these volcanoes blow up and they had no idea it was going to happen. So there's aspects of really pushing disbelief And I think that's where the like chaos, and especially the way I use saxophone, is kind of trying to just like coax the listener a little bit, you know, like this isn't the scale that you're used to.
Right, right.
And so hopefully by kind of unsettling a little bit of the meter by being, you know, being improvisational, and even just like having different lengths of songs and stuff like that. Really thinking about the way that our most genuine experiences aren't something that you can really contain very well, even though they might be in very brief moments.
Okay.
Like that royal visit to Uranium City on the length of the monarchy, that's nothing.
Sure, it was an afternoon.
That's going to the bathroom.
Totally, yeah.
That guy has went to the bathroom way more times than he ever went to like anywhere in Canada. You know what I mean?
Especially at 99 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, totally.
Yeah.
But so I think there's aspects of just understanding that you really need to just let the discs slip sometimes, and really just be like, okay, the thoughts are just gonna flow, and I'm gonna see where they're gonna take me. And Royal Visit to Uranium City is the title to this thing, but I'm never really coming up on that topic too much, other than I do say Uranium City in the one song. And hopefully just letting them kind of create their own idea in the same way as, you know, a character in a book will have a name, and the name may gain all this meaning to you, but it was just said on the first page, and it wasn't like their parents named them in the book and you had all this blah blah blah. But it's like, this is what an Amelia looks like to me.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. Yeah. So, you know, with all of this, this record's out now. I mean, people are hearing it. We're not just in Winnipeg, but obviously elsewhere as well. When this pandemic ends, if the pandemic ends, what is your what is your plan? Like, how do you kind of go from having this album out during this bizarre time where no one could play shows, and because it seems like it could have a very strong visual element. I know you've made videos, you know, to go with it and everything like that. So are you hoping to be able to perform this live as some kind of a larger project, or once you've done this, are you moving on to the next thing?
Really just simple answers on to the next thing, because I'm not really anybody or anyone to like get the team to really do this record it's like full justice. That I'm still just, you know, I'm just trying to keep the tap flowing, you know. And so I have like another record done that's a bit more heavy like this. It's a lot of it's what's called Doomy, which is like traditional Ukrainian folk songs that would be
cool.
like
Okay. Yeah.
History. And so that's where like the babushka stuff started, because I recorded that before this. And the babushka stuff is like me just being Ukrainian and being interested in bringing that out in my artistic expression, which is something that's easier to do when you're just a solo artist compared to being in a band. And you're like, hey guys, I'm gonna do this like thing where I wear a babushka, and they're like, what's that? But I'll always play songs from this for sure, but almost undoubtedly there'll be another album of mine before I get to play a show, which is kind of like, I don't know about you, and I don't want to necessarily get super into the pandemic, but things kind of feel different. Like it seems like this summer is really a question mark that I have no idea what it's going to be like. And I know even that for you guys, it was different here last summer than like where I was in Ontario. Like we had the first mask mandate. It was like lockdown like that. But last summer, I also did play shows, and my partner was the only person there, but it was very much treated like this is a show. I would put up a poster, there's set times, and like they would come out and I'm playing for an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that's something anyway, right?
Yeah, if there's not shows in the way we typically know it, I do want to try something. Like, you know, the classic porches that people have here where it's like the foyer on the front? I have one of those, and I'm like, how cool would it be if I was inside and people could sit outside, and you have that barrier. The PA is outside though, and I just rock it inside. You could have a crazy light show. I don't know.
That would be cool. So, I really like that. And one of the things that's kind of I hope happens as a result of all this is that people get more creative with ways to do shows, assuming we can't do big shows like that used to happen, right? I mean, if like a porch show or some kind of other weird thing where people are spaced interestingly or in a bizarre location where you wouldn't expect a show, I kind of welcome that. It's unfortunate for people trying to make money, obviously, off playing music, that they can't do big shows or festivals like they used to. But maybe the silver lining is that people come up with more creative ideas, and the whole kind of infrastructure for playing shows changes. I don't know. I'm kind of semi hopeful that things will be different in a good way. But yeah, who knows?
They are going to be different, and that's for sure. And I've already kind of noticed the change a bit, where the last, like, I'll say the last 4 years, maybe 5, I've played more house shows, if not equal to what I've played in regular venues. And part of that is like, there's long been a thing where like venues will have a weird feeling about hip hop.
Yeah.
They're just it's racism sometimes, and other times it's just like, this person just kind of doesn't know. And they're like, classic rock, blues, this is music. But so I'm hoping that there'll be a bit more of a, like, not so much that the shows will change, but that the audience experience is definitely going to change.
Yeah.
And there's one experience of mine that I always draw on a bit of, like, the best thing a musician can have is someone with no expectations. Even better if they don't know that you're a musician. And there was this one time I was back in Saskatoon, like for Christmas, and I'm out at this show, and it's like the end of the night, 3 a.m., like dance party kind of. And a buddy comes up, he's like, hey, and we're talking or whatever. He's like, hey, it's my birthday tomorrow. Like, do you want to come by and play? And his house is the type of house where like there are shows there. And like I've played there before. Like, it has a name in the city, you know what I mean? But I show up and there's like 8 people there.
Nice.
And we're playing Cards Against Humanity. Like, it's not a party.
Yeah.
And so it's like maybe like 2 hours, and I'm just kind of like, hey, like, so do you want me to play? He's like, oh, well, yeah, totally. I love music. And it's like, well, yeah, I came here to play. Of course I'm going to play. So I just rock a set in the living room to these 8 people. That's awesome. After this, one guy is like, man, I didn't even know there was going to be a show tonight. And then you started playing, and like your kind of experience to my music, it was like, he was like, I didn't know what I was hearing at first. Yeah, and I was like, is this even good? And then I was like, oh yeah. And it's like, whoa. And it just kept getting more political and blah, blah, blah. But like that kind of experience of someone just being like, oh, whoa, music's happening. Just
wandering into it by accident. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I almost think because we've been so deprived of it, people are going to kind of start to have experiences like that. Even if it's sadly going to be like a lot of people having really good movie experiences, and nothing against movies, but like, people are going to flock to the theaters. If we can have a show with a mosh pit, everyone's going to Cineplex Odeon. And like, movies are going to be such a, like, I don't even know what's going to happen with Hollywood. It's going to be weird, but hopefully that nobody's going to get left out. You know, I think if you're doing something good, then people are going to show up for it, I hope. And if it's, spaced out in a backyard or in a field or whatever, I think people are going to be happy with something this summer, and maybe after that, I don't know.
I hope so. I prefer house shows myself. I feel like you get a more intimate experience, even if there's 8 people, than there is with 3,000. I get why 3,000 people is important for a lot of artists to be able to do their job. But I mean, as a concert goer or listener, I'd much rather be sitting there with a few people in a backyard and having someone play a stripped down set and not have any kind of any barriers between them and the audience, right? Where it's just like, oh, we're just hanging out. Here's some songs. What do you guys want to hear? All right, I'll learn that. I'll learn that right now, kind of thing. So it's a cool vibe, I think.
And that's how it really used to be, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of something I was thinking of with the other record that has like the Ukrainian songs, of where it's like, I wanted to make some of my own, and thinking like, well, what's the story that would be told? Because there are versions of songs that have started here, and it's people being like, man, we were lied to, like, this sucks, kind of stuff like that. I'm like I was in academia for a bit, so I was looking at this stuff really being like, oh, where can I pull themes and like look at like the settler complex and stuff like this. And so I've kind of like toned that down a bit. And I think that's where I'm letting those more complicated things, like I was saying earlier, letting that kind of happen in the music a little bit more, and not be so word heavy on the songs. A little bit more feeling.
Where can people find the new album if they want to, and also your other stuff as well?
Bandcamp is the main spot. This is the first full release of mine, full solo release that's all up on streaming.
Okay.
I have one other album, and that's the collaboration with Kaylee Aquanaut called Ancient Fish from the Northwest. That's
that was last year, right?
And everything.
Was that 2020
Yeah.
that came out? Yeah.
In November.
Okay.
November 2020. And I wasn't quite a Manitoba Winnipeg artist then. Yeah,
Okay.
We'll be fair.
Right. You were en route to becoming one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so Bandcamp is where my whole discography is, and then also on YouTube I have most of my songs for the last 2 years have music videos and stuff. So there's just lots of content on there. And but yeah, Bandcamp would be the main spot. But if you're curious about this last record, it's on Apple Music, it's on TikTok, it's all
really?
over
Okay.
the place.
Cool.
Yeah, TikTok, most music that comes out nowadays goes right to TikTok, and even my stuff is now on Twitch as well. If someone was a Twitch streamer and wanted to use it, they could do that as well.
I've avoided TikTok so far. I feel like I'm too old to even understand what it is. So I just pretend it doesn't exist.
I don't want to necessarily be on this TikTok or be on this podcast saying that TikTok's awesome, but like if you have the one thing I will say, if you have fun anywhere on the internet, I guarantee you can have the most of that fun on TikTok. Like whatever content you like, it's the best there. Of course you gotta use it, but yeah, I'll shut up about TikTok.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
I'm over there starting beef with like Canadian music magazines and stuff.
Oh, nice. That's probably worth it.
Nobody's looking at it, so I'm like, I'm just gonna talk smack and like just exist in this world while it's kind of on the periphery to anyone like above 25. Right
on. And then you have physical copies of this new album too, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, there'll be CDs. I just talked to the manufacturer today. I should be getting them. They should be getting shipped out my way on Thursday.
Nice.
So they're on Bandcamp, but if someone's listening to this and you're in Winnipeg, don't hesitate to DM me or something. And if you want to pick that up, or if you want to get a digital copy and just include that you would like a physical, they're not going to be selling out, I don't think. So if you want to do that, to just not pay shipping, then
cool.
Totally. And if you get the CD, there maybe is, I wish I had it around me, but there's maybe going to be a secret CDR that I made in the week before the release. Nothing done prior, week before the release. That might be included. Maybe.
Cool.
Maybe.
Very cool.
Definitely. Yeah.